Hey there, this is Jonathan, and in the following set of tutorials we're going to take a quick look at programming and interactivity in Edge Animate. So first things first, we need to look at what is the type of coding that we're going to do. So I've got a little lecture that I've got here, and we're not going to go through it too much, but I just want to point out that we're going to be using JavaScript, and JavaScript is an object-oriented programming language. Object-oriented programming languages, a lot of them use something called ECMA script. That's kind of the syntax of the programming language. And there are lots of different ones: ActionScript, JavaScript, Ruby, Python, lots of different ones. But they're based upon a structure called OOP, which has classes, objects, methods, and properties. And so a lot of times you're going to see it kind of written like this. We have the object, and then we have this dot in between, and that separates an object from its method or property. Now you'll also see a lot of these methods have internal words like some other method here, and the internal words are camel case, it's called, which are uppercase. So just wanted to kind of point that out. Now when it comes to coding in Edge Animate, there are 4 places that the code can go. It can go on the current timeline as a timeline action, on the stage, and there's only one stage in the entire project, and it can go on a timeline as trigger, and it can go on an individual layer. So this can get a little confusing, of course. So first things first, there's only one stage, and so here's the stage actions right here. Now you'll also see it when we have the stage selected. You'll see a code up here and a little code window here, and all 3 of these do basically the same thing. These are tied to these items here on the left. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that, and you'll see composition ready is a good one. And what composition ready says is that when this composition is ready, let's do something. And I'm not going to change any code right now. Now that we've added that code, you'll see that that particular code little indicator is now solid, and you can see it there and you can see it there. Now the next one we have is a timeline action. This one is at the top right above that, and this is the only place that you find it with any timeline. It's just that one place, and there's no 3 other places that you find it. Here, update is one of those that you might be able to do, but you have to be careful about using something like this, because it means that every time that the timeline tries to move forward, it would run a function, and that means that you could bog down your system pretty well. If I wanted to delete that, just take it off. Now if I go inside of a symbol, here's a symbol. Now it has its own timeline action, which is separate from the action of the main timeline. If I did that update here and then closed it, you'll see that I have that action there, but when I go back to the main timeline, that action disappears because it's only inside the timeline of that symbol. Now we can also have triggers. Triggers are where we go forward in time and we create a little trigger right there. In fact, I already have one called sim stop, and it triggers at 1040 milliseconds. And then I could move this around to exactly 1000 milliseconds. And if I want to go somewhere else in time, I can create another trigger just by inserting that and saying, let's say, playback stop in the stage. And we'll get to what that code is here in just a minute. So there's where I can create multiple triggers. Now the last type of action we have is an object action. For example, we might want it so that when we click on this button, it will open up a website. And that's why I've named my button URL link _ PTN. So I'm going to click on that, say when you click on it, let's go ahead and change it so that you open up a website. So pretty easy to do there. And now I'm ready to click on that thing and open up adobe.com. Now you'll notice that the code is here on the left, and when we have that object selected especially, you'll be able to see that code over here, and you'll also be able to see that that's the current object that's open, and this code window is going to apply to that current object that is open. So, good. If I go to the stage once again, that changes to the stage, and then of course that's up here. So that's 4 places for us to put code, which can be a little confusing because since you've got things in lots of places, where do you find it? Well, there is one other place that you can find this code in Edge Animate, and I think this is really, really nice, and that is the code window. And what this does is this shows me all the different triggers and buttons and everything else all at one time. And I think that that's really, really nice. And you can even see URL button underscore btn dot click. So it's even telling me which event that's on there. If I were to go and add a different event for this, like a mouse over, and I don't think I have to do much more. Now I should be able to go to the code, and you'll see that we have that mouse over there instead. And it's nice because it means that you can put code in here if you want. No errors, which is nice as well, and it does kind of show you when things are not working. For example, if I had an error here, it will show me that there's a syntax error there that it's not understanding. So very good to get used to this particular window so that you can troubleshoot your code. Next thing is dealing with object names and symbols. Now, anytime that you create an object, you are creating some sort of instance of that object that needs to be named. Now, same thing with symbols. You're creating an instance of those that has to be uniquely named in order to be used. In fact, I don't think that you can name any two objects in the entire project the same thing. And that means that I have this label underscore txt right here. And if I go inside my timeline, I have another label underscore txt. Well, it's not quite the same. I had to call it label1 because I can't name it label underscore txt. Even though they're in two different places, they cannot have the same name. And that's a really nice thing in here for sure. Anyway, if I were to add some code to this page, such as when I click on, maybe when I'll do the composition, I'll say when the composition is ready, what I'd like to do is change the text of that label, and it's called new text, and this is sample. Just put that. So now what I'm doing is I'm linking to that text item here, and we'll talk about what that link target stuff is all about in a second. And what I'm doing is changing that text. Now the problem here is, what if I decided that I wanted to change this and I wanted to call this info.text. Now if I go back to that action, you'll see that it still says label underscore txt, not info.underscore txt. So I've now changed that relationship. If we go back to our code window, we should see if there's an error, and it's not showing us one at all. And that's going to be something that we're going to definitely have to troubleshoot as we work with this software, because we've changed the relationship of that code to that object by changing the name of the object after we've done our code. And you have to be very, very careful of doing that. Otherwise, you can totally mess things up. You have to get into a habit of naming your objects first before you apply any code, and that's really important. Now, when it comes to naming objects, there's a few things you're allowed to do and a few suggestions that I have for what you should do. First things, you can't put any spaces into your names. It will convert them to an underscore. You can't put any special characters. You cannot start with a number, I don't think. And you should use camel case and make your names descriptive. I try and choose a name that indicates what that particular object is doing. Now, some possible naming ones are using like the underscore btn or something like that. Here is an underscore system for a sound. This is for video. This is for a text. Now, this is coming from Flash for me, but that's because that's where I started coding, and at least this kind of interactivity. And that's a carryover that I think is probably a good thing, because then just by looking at the name of your object, you know what kind of object it is. So it can be pretty cool. Now, here are the 4 basic ingredients to a script. You can call it T plus another T, or whatever you like. Um, First thing we have is triggers, events, and actions. And those are the three items that you'll see actually on the Adobe's stuff here. So they just say triggers, events, and actions. Those are only the three ingredients for them. But I know that targets are important as well. So the first thing is triggers are the timeline triggers that execute code at a specific position on the timeline. You've already kind of seen that. Events are things that trigger code as well, such as clicking on a button or going into a new timeline or something like that. The next thing we have are actions. Actions maybe can be properly called functions, but they do something. Go to a website, play a timeline. It's usually you have some sort of argument that goes with that action that tells it what to do, what kind of which web page to go to. Anyway, the last thing is targets, and targets is actually, for me, one of the most important ingredients because it's the one that you're going to be doing so much. The first thing that we have is this one is first thing about this is actually having a trigger, and that's just this is a trigger right there. The next thing we have is an event, such as click, and you remember that we created click events, mouse over events on our different objects there. Then we have our action, such as stop or change the HTML of a text item. And then we have the targets, and the targets are starting with this, SYM, and that means the timeline that you're currently on. And it's kind of a reflexive pronoun like me or I. SYM stands for wherever I'm currently at. Let's go ahead and start there. And then it says go inside of that timeline and stop it. So this is going to stop the main timeline if that's where the code currently is. Now we can also get timelines of symbols. So starting from the main timeline, we can go forward and get the timeline of a button. Then we can find an object inside of that button called MyLabel and change the text of it. So this is the next target that you see here. That's an object target, whereas this is a symbol target. And this is a nice function or method to be able to get the main timeline from anywhere else. What you're doing is you're starting from where I'm at currently, and you're going back to the composition. So you're getting the composition and then getting the stage which is on top of the composition. So that's kind of how that works. Now we're using the dot syntax to do that, and that's where you saw these separations. The first way of using it is to denote a target path to a specific object. So that's where you have the dot in between these different paths here, the symbol and the object that's inside of it. And then also you use them to separate the methods and arguments from the objects. So here you can see the objects and objects and methods. And this one has an argument inside of it. So we're going to look at that one in the next tutorial. So let's go on.